what we know now. And the presenters are Patrick Stone, Therese Wimsatt, and Jason Littleton. Want to remind you all that you do your evaluations on the app at the end of the session. And that's it. So take it away.
All right, we're going to spend about 10 minutes on each section, take about 5 minutes for questions at the end. I'm going to be discussing the example template, clipping triggers, followed by Jason's to be showing how to use the civil cells and how the super XML are going to be delivered shortly is set up and intended to be used. And then Therese is going to show how to work with annotation groups, how she's been working with annotation groups. Please visit our CAD standards page for updates for technical support form. We really would like to use this technical support form. It goes with more than just if you email me or Aaron or any other individuals. This targets a bigger group. You're going to be able to get an answer quicker than if you just sent it to 2 of us. Now I'm going to take about 5 minutes of your time and talk about the example 2-lane rule, the switch template we're delivering. And I'm going to show you how the template is intended to be used. And it'll give you an idea of how these switches work so you can build your own templates and use those. We're going to talk about templates and switches, and in particular, the switches are a way to clip the graphics of the main line, for the entrances or approaches. Like we've got shown here, we're going to clip out these graphics. That's done with both point controls and templates. We're going to concentrate on this section of the video with the templates. And like I said, this is going to be delivered with the standards release. It's coming out soon, and it's called example 2-lane rule with switch. The difference between the example 2-lane rule with switch and the example 2-lane rule is obviously the 2-lane with switch has a switch in it to turn off some of these components, and it's broken down into separate components, unlike our original example 2-lane that's got one component for the entire surface. You can't turn off like your shoulder and such. And most of that is intended to be used for, you can use it with in condition exceptions. You could use this for point controls, horizontal feature constraints, parametric constraints. But we're just going to really concentrate on point controls. It's all set up to turn off these in conditions and field and such. So we're calling this one the left EC shoulder EC switch. We need to make sure that we're using a null point. And most of the magic is happening there with the horizontal constraint for the offset. Make my video get caught up here. This 10 foot is for the horizontal from the center line to the left shoulder EC switch. And there's nothing magical about 10. We chose that just so it wouldn't be over top of the existing center line or on top of the left edge of pavement. That way, when you're trying to control that in your plan view, you won't have a line on top of either one of those. It's nothing magical about 10 foot. You can use whatever you like. And these are meant to be used with the other methods. We've got a full-length video posted on our website showing you how to use the labels or different switches to turn them on and off. We're basically going to concentrate on point controls, mainly because that's the way Sam and Todd teaches in their Open Roads 2 class. And that range of 100, if you're outside of that with your feature, you'll obviously have to change it. So let's concentrate on these components. The display rules attached to this left surface, and these are pretty simple display rules. We've set just 2 of them up. The left and right should be set up the same. Let's look at the left display rule. And we've got the name of it and then a brief description of what this is doing. It's turning off the paved shoulder and the in conditions. And we've chosen the type on that is going to be an absolute horizontal. There are a couple different selections you could make here. We went with the absolute just mainly because that's what they're teaching it in Sam and Todd's class. But what it's doing is it's setting a distance of 10 foot between the left EC switch and the center line. And since it's absolute, you know, if it's 10.1 or 9.9, it's going to turn all those graphics off for you. And that's going to clean up your corridor, which you'll see in a few minutes. But anytime you have any of these point controls, we suggest you test these. And, you know, it's pretty easy to do with the horizontal. If you move it any, it's going to shut those features off. And check both sides. Because if it's not working in your template here with this testing, then it's not going to work in your corridor either. It'll just save you some trouble down the road if something's wrong with this template. Now let's talk about this left asphalt surface 1 here. And those names are subject to change for relief. That might be shoulder here. But anyway, this is the one that has the display rule attached to it, or the component that has that. And the rest of these are set up to turn on and off through, you know, a parent-child relationship. So we set all of the other components and in conditions to be a child of that left asphalt surface. And we're just going to click through a few of these here and show you that they're all set. Okay, and with that, you know, we're recommending you build a control elements file. And the file is basically just a file to store your control elements or clipping triggers, basically, you know, horizontal alignments that you want to, that cause the trigger to work. So we're going to do some corridor clipping with these triggers, and there's multiple ways you can do this. You can do this with horizontal feature constraints, parametric constraints. You can complex these geometries together. And we're going to just concentrate on, you know, point control on this, and in particular, the geometry horizontal and offset by taper. And you can find that it's under the geometry tab. And we're going to do single offset partial element. Now this is set up for 50-foot offset. The only reason I've set that to 50 foot was so it would show up on the this display pretty easy. A lot of people like to set that 300-400 feet out. You need to make sure your feature definition is set to that working clipping trigger. It's set up so it won't plot. We need to add a left to this just for consistency. And we need to make sure that we turn the persist snap off on this because it can cause you some problems down the road. And we're just going to go through and follow the prompts and pick the beginning and end of these entrances to be clipped. And we'll do that one more time. And just add a left to be consistent. I mean, you don't have to, but it makes it easier if you've got on this one, you know, we're only going to do 2 of them, but if you had a, you know, big corridor with a lot of them, it would make it more difficult to find. And these are all editable. So like this one, we can change to 10 foot. You can change the stationing there or the offset, won't much matter. And this is set up exactly the same, but what you're going to do is get 2 control lines to have to find it if you're doing it with this method. So what we can do is go in here and complex these by element. It'll make one. And you can chain all these together down through there on a pretty good run. You'd have to, I would suggest setting it to manual and setting that maximum gap to whatever it takes. In this case, I did 100. And then we're just going to add a left working clipping trigger to the name. You need to make sure that these are pointing in the direction of your alignment. You can see the little arrow on there, it tells you which way it's going to go. And what that's basically done is just join those 2 elements together, made them one, and it'll make it a little easier when you're selecting these in your corridor file. So now we're going to switch over to a corridor file. And you could put these control elements in the corridor file if you chose to. It's just we found that you have a lot less trouble if you keep these files separated, you know, throughout open roads. And what we're going to be concentrating and working on here, well, the first thing we got to do is attach our reference file with the control elements in it. So basically you would attach it here. I'm attempting to do a reload, and all you really have to do is pick that and hit the reload, and those elements will show up. So now we've got our elements in there. The remainder of our work's going to be done in the corridor. We're going to use the corridor objects and add point controls, basically. And you could do it with parametric constraints and such. We're just going to concentrate on point controls. And it's very similar to the step we just made with the placing the geometries in there. But we'll use the heads up display and just go in there and pick beginning and ending of these entrances. And you could use key station inputs, but we're just going to pick them. And you'll have to pick the point that we set up in that template, that left switch, and the right switch on the ones on the right, of course. And we're going to use that linear geometry. And you can pick it from the drop-down menu. I kind of like just with the heads-up display here, so you can pick it off your drawing. I find it a little easier. And then just go with the defaults here, and it'll clip out and make it ready to put your, if you're going to use, like Jason's going to show, a civil cell, it's clipped out. You're going to have to do this a couple times. You know, once you're in your civil cell, you'll have to change that around a little bit, but that's clipping out because we, you know, we hit a key station there. That's why you've got that gap. I'll show you on the next entrance how to put it in, and there's a couple ways to fix that. And I'll show you here. So same thing we did before. We're picking the begin and end station of the entrances and locating our point. We're using the horizontal line. You could pick it right there, that clipping too, but we'll just pick it on the heads up. It works a little easier. What you're going to do here to eliminate that gap is you can enter a minus of, you know, 0.01 or 0.05. And what that's going to do is just force a template drop there, and you won't have that gap like we've got on the other entrance I've just shown. And you put a positive over here, of course. And we've got that clip. We can go back and clean up this first entrance. We can use a key station. And that should clean this one up. So I got to do that right quick. You're just going to pick outside of that control element. And if you pick directly on that control element, we'll show you here, you know, since it's within that, it's going to clip it. Of course, you're not going to get that template drop, but you can easily just move that out. You can key that station in. I just slightly edge it over. And that'll get that ready for you to put like a civil cell or run a corridor on, something like that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason to talk about the civil cells.
All right, I'm Jason Littleton with American Engineers. I worked with Patrick for a little bit, but civil cells are something that Bentley introduced with open roads to help you model things a little bit quicker. I want to make sure that everybody is aware that they are not intended to be any kind of silver bullet that's going to do the design for you or do all the model for you. It's just a starting point. So with KYTC, they've delivered a DGN library that contains right now a rural entrance civil cell, and here with an upcoming CAD standards release, they will have civil cells for urban entrances conditions 1, 2, and 3. So The main thing that you're going to need to run these civil cells is going to be your entrance geometry, so a horizontal and a profile, and then your crossroad corridor and your existing terrain model. So, and let me see if I can pause this real quick, because I sped up my video. My video was like 15, 20 minutes long, and I'm trying to get this in 7. But I really do work as fast as this video is going. But the main thing is, because of limitations to open roads, we have to create a secondary element to pass to the civil cell. And that's what I'm doing here, is I'm just creating an offset element that only applies over the section that the profile is active. And I'm just using the offset commands and then projecting the profile from my entrance to that new element. And if I've got the persist snaps turned on, if I make adjustments to the entrance geometry, that element will also update. So, and then here, we're getting ready to place that civil cell on that working graphic that we've got there. And you can see here, these are all the ones that are supplied with the KYTC workspace. Most of those are developed by Bentley, so they're not to KYTC standards, but those last 4 have been developed there. So when you go to place it, you see these red lines, and that's what the civil cell is going to need for you to tell it. So, hey, here is a reference element, and then the black lines that you see are stuff that's going to be generated by the civil cell itself. The key when you're going through here, take your time and read those prompts. I mean, with MicroStation, they've done the prompts in the lower left-hand corner forever. Now they're on these heads up. It's telling you what element to select to pass to this civil cell. So you want to take your time. The civil cell is going to do the bulk of the work, but just pay attention. Here you're seeing a preview, and it's kind of tough to see in that view what it's actually doing, because I got the wireframe in there as well. But you can switch the direction that those reference lines are running, because when you build a civil cell, it's going all in one direction. So especially for the rural entrance, you may have to flip some lines around to get it to go to the left instead of the right. So there, it's placed that civil cell. I mean, it took 10 seconds to place it and process it. But it doesn't really match my existing entrance too well. The thing is that with the civil cells, keep in mind that everything in there is able to be manipulated. So that half entrance width there, okay, I'm changing it from 6 feet to 12 feet, and it, boom, it moves that out. The same thing on the other side. So you can adjust a lot of this stuff. Where this is an urban entrance, I've got that F dimension on the standard drawing. What we've got in here built in standard with the civil cells 5 feet. Well, if you want 10 feet, you just have to go in and change that value, and Open Roads will dynamically update that for you. Sometimes because there are a lot of elements built into this that when you go and select on it, you may have to reset a few times to get that element that will actually change it. So some of those appear kind of grayed out and you're not able to select them. Keep going until you get something that you can. The surface template, so the pavement and the cement concrete entrance pavement are built off the surface template. So you've got a proposed terrain that we've built, and what we've done is we've got just a generic template that says, okay, we've got 8 inches of concrete and 4 inches of DGA. That's our cement concrete entrance pavement, and we applied it there. That's for the rural entrance pavement section. That's all editable, and you can swap that out. The easiest way that I've found to do that is to go through the Project Explorer, and you can see right there in this file, I've got one civil cell, the one that we just placed. Just a side note, I would go on ahead and rename that because when you get to 20 of them in a file and you're trying to find the one that you're looking for, you got 20 of them that's named KYTC Entrance Urban, you'll thank yourself later if you've got that renamed. And then down there in the dependent elements is where you can access, okay, that service template. If I wanted to switch it out, I can go into, hit those 3 dots over there and into my template library and use my own service template. The same thing with those linear templates over there. You can swap those out. The thing is that a lot of this is set up to help move you along and get you something built quickly, but it's up to you to go in and finalize that detail. I mean, right here, if I were to cut a section at the end of that entrance, it's probably not going to be tied to the existing ground, but I can go on to that entrance edge of pavement and assign its own profile to tie it into the ground if that was something that was critical. Here I'm going through and flipping out my corridor. With urban, the way that Patrick showed you isn't going to work as well because we're needing those features for the curb and for the sidewalk to hand over to here. So we're drawing an element around there, and that's where you turn off your persist snaps. And what you can do is in your corridor, you've got that shape drawn around the area, and you can tell the corridor, hey, I want to clip based off of this element. So when we go through and select that clipping, we tell it what corridor we want to be clipped, and that's our mainline corridor. And then we'll tell it what element or elements to, because we can add multiple on there. We accept that, and you should see in that 3D view, it cleans up my 3D model just by clipping that out. So again, there's still more that would need to be done to clean this up, but I mean, heck, for 15 minutes, I think that gets you a pretty good ways. And if you've ever tried to model one of these by hand, you definitely know what we're talking about. But you can see there in that 3D view that it's you do have that. We used a condition 1, and so you do have the entrance draw down like that. So next is the super elevation, and that's something that I will admit that until probably about a year ago, I was calculating my own, putting it in a spreadsheet and importing it because I did not trust what Bentley was providing. And I had somebody ask me, said, hey, how does the super elevation work? And I said, I'll be honest with you, I don't know. And that got me to say, hey, I need to dig in and figure this out. So what we did was we went in and we updated the delivered super elevation rules file from KYTC. It's that KYTC Imperial XML. And what we've done, you can see here on the E selection, that's your super elevation calculation. You can use either ASHCO tables, or you can use the equations that are behind them to calculate your super elevation. So your 4%, 6%, and 8% tables will not interpolate. So if you calculate needing a super elevation of 6.12, it's going to round that up to 6.2 if you're using the table, because that's the next highest table entry. If you wanted to calculate it to 6.12, use ASHCO method 5. That's what those tables are based on. The same thing for our runoff length selections, but there's a caveat there. So you can use the ASHCO table, that's table 316A, that gives you the runoff length, but there's 2 things to keep in mind there. One is minor and one is not. The minor one is that's derived off of 12-foot lanes. So the runoff lengths that it gives you, if you have a 15-foot lane, they're going to be too short. So just keep that in mind. The bigger issue is that only applies, you can only use that if you have 1 or 2 lanes rotated on your template. So on one side of the template, if you have a 3-lane section, there's no entry, there's no table entries for 1.5 lanes. If you have 3 lanes, there's no table entries for 3 lanes. So you would need to go and run that AASHTO relative gradient method. The biggest thing that tripped me up was this pivot method, because I was thinking that open roads is saying, hey, where are you pivoting about? But that's not necessarily what they're asking, because you'll tell open roads where it's pivoting when you actually assign the super elevation to the corridor. What they're asking for here is, where am I going to calculate the super elevation? So they've got, what's that, 7 different options for your pivot method, what they're calling the pivot method. But really, just keep in mind, you only need 2, because otherwise it's going to calculate your super elevation based on where that blue point is. So if you're doing an undivided highway where you're rotating about your center line, you want to use crown. You think, hey, I want to use center line, but when you have more than 1 lane rotated, that gives you some really weird results. Your curves to the right end up being super elevated the wrong way when you're coming out of that curve in a tangent. Your normal crown looks like a V if you have more than 1 lane. So for undivided roadways, use a crown. And then if you have depressed medians, okay, I thought let's use divided inside because that's where we're rotating. But open roads is calculating based on that inside edge of pavement there. That's not how we typically do it, because at that point, your outside lanes are going to be super elevated 6.4 and your inside will be 6.2, which I guess that'd be okay, but that's just not how we had done it historically. So, and the crown wouldn't work there because typically on divided highways, you have a crown on the left and a crown on the right, and it'll calculate that super elevation accordingly. So using that center line gives you the results that that you need. We have seen some issues with the super elevation when we assign it to a corridor. And I know Patrick's worked with some people that the corridor just acts like it isn't linked to the super elevation anymore. So with the point controls, when you look in your dynamic sections, there are little magenta boxes. They look super elevated, but your template's not. We've seen that on stuff where we've had open roads calculate that super elevation, but we haven't noticed that same issue on super elevations where we've imported it from CSV. So what you can do, run a report on your super elevation when you get it finalized. That'll serve as a record. You can also use that super elevation calculation to cross-check what you've got. But there's also a report called super elevation to CSV, where you can copy that, paste it in a text file and save it as a CSV, and you're just about ready to re-import that into open roads. And that's kind of a workaround to get your super elevation linked back up. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Therese to talk about the annotation groups and how you can manipulate those to clean up your plans a little bit.
Okay, so what I have here is a cross-section annotation, a drawing model, and I have an initial ultimate highway divided, where there's some things by default that are annotating that I don't necessarily want. One of them being that long dimension line, as well as the text. And then also, it's kind of hard to see, but that slope right there as well. Those are annotating, and I don't necessarily want them to. So I'm going to show you how you can hop back into the design model of this DGN and modify some of those things. Also the 2 ditch elevations, how they're up above. I'm going to show you how you can bring them down below the ditch, just because it doesn't really work with my initial ultimate design. To do any modifications to your annotation group, you have to be in the default model. Won't be able to do it from the drawing model. And then you'll come over to your Explorer in the Open Road Standards, open up your active DGN, with that blue icon. And then go down to your annotation groups. And that one was a cross section. And then you'll just drill down until you can see those annotation groups. The ones that'll show up there are only the ones that you used in your DGN. So I'm going to modify that one. Right click and manage that annotation group. Which then brings up your managed annotation window. You definitely have to be patient. Some of these take a minute to load, as everything does in open roads. And then you have all these annotation groups in that yellow column on the left side. What I wanted to do with the dimension labels and the dimension lines, those two groups there. And then once that loads, I'm going to start with the labels, and you can click on the 3 dots there on the location. It opens another window, and it has some rules already set up, but the main thing that I want to change is the segments to be filtered. I want to switch it from use all segments, and I want to define the segments that I want labeled. When you click that, it gives you that option down at the bottom to select the segments from your template. And then it's just asking you to go select your template. And then you can select the segments from the template. There'll be a long list already in there from the standards. How I usually do it is go through and remove them all out and just work with and putting new segments in there. So that's what I'll remove all those out. And then zoom in on the template there and click on each segment that I want those dimension labels for. So I want my page shoulder, that error box always pops up for me, but it works if I hit continue. So how I've been working is to continue through it. And then if you kind of zoom out and zoom in on that window, it shows you what segments you're adding into that box down below. And then for some reason that one I tried clicking a few times and it wouldn't add in. So at the end here, I'll show you another way. If it doesn't work for you to click on the segment, you can manually add them into that list down below. I always go through and check those segments. It's your start point and your end point, and make sure that everything I just clicked on was actually something I wanted to annotate. It looks like one of them I grabbed went to the guardrail point, which I don't really want to annotate. So you can either remove it out of there, or what I'm going to do is edit it because it didn't grab that lane there. So you would just need to know your 2 point names, and you can just type in that list there. So I wanted to go from my left center line to my left lane line, or my 2 point names, or LLL. And then those hand modified ones just turn blue. You'll close out of that and apply your expression change. And then generally when I am working and modifying some things, I like to apply one expression change, switch back into the drawing model and test it. For this example, I'm just doing them all at once. So I did the dimension labels. I skipped the dimension lines, but you would modify that the same way. And then next I'm moving into that right slope annotation. That looked a little funky. And you do it the same way. We'll come in and modify the location. Instead of using all segments, again, we're going to create a list of segments. You'll go select your template. And then go through, I like to remove those again and click on them from my template. So go through and remove all of those segments and then zoom into your template and click through those. some of these, because I have a lot of ink conditions on there, it takes a minute to pick up the one that I'm going for. So it's kind of a lot of clicking through, zooming in, zooming out, make sure they're turned blue. I was able to get them all added in there by just clicking on the template, but again, if you can't get them added in, you could add them in down below. You could look at that list on your left. It should be your point names from your template, and you can add them over that way as well. So then, you know, once I've got all of those added in, one thing I didn't mention, if it is highlighted that kind of bluish green color, and you click on it again, it deselects it. We'll close out of that. Apply your expression change again. And that should have corrected my slope. And then the last thing that I was going to show was those ditch elevations. So that's in the cross-section point elevation annotation for that group name. And that one, it's annotating the right points. It's just, we want to modify the location it's placing it in. So instead of like the other two where we clicked that location and the 3 dots up at the top, this one is more just in the settings. It'll be in the placement and the vertical offset. So right now it was at a positive value, and we just would want to change it to a negative value to go down below that point. And that's just kind of, you may just have to play around with that value as to where it actually ends up. But you could get in a lot of those different groups. They're all pretty, they're named, you know, you should be able to tell what it is pretty quickly. And just kind of play around with those settings to get them where you want them to be. And then I'm just going to hop back in, drawing model for the cross section, remove the model annotation, and rerun that same annotation group that I've edited. And then you should see those ditch elevation points will shoot down. We then have slopes on our ditch foreslope and our ditch back slope. For that long dimension, the text is gone because that was the one I edited. I didn't edit the dimension lines, so you just go back and modify that, just like you had for the text. I think that is all I have. Anyone have any questions on any of our 3 topics?
You had one coming on the chat. It says, why are you using a point control to flip when you can have a template look for a feature definition?
Well, it's set up to do all of them. I just did that one because that's what we're showing at productivity classes. There's multiple ways to flip it. And we put a full length video out there showing 3 or 4 different methods, but the only reason I want to point control is that's what we're teaching in the approach to class, just to be consistent with that. Back there follow.
Something that I had not mentioned earlier, I did mention I had a 15-minute video for the civil cells and boiled down to 7, but the videos that were used here will be available on the support page for y'all's reference later if you need them. No other best? Yeah, on the rural entrances, that rural entrance civil cell does have the radius built into it, and it's just like anything else with that, it's adjustable. You can, I think it's defaulted to 25. You can change it to whatever you want.
You have the super.
Yes.
We run into Boston. Have you run into an issue where the super calculation, which is often stuff,
I can't say that I have. So you're saying that the super elevation calculations just.
Yeah, we had that one particular job, which actually said job, and then came back at one time.
Thanks, Bentley. But no, I haven't, but that's a good point to make is, hey, once you get your super elevation set, go ahead and run that report. So you have that record of what it was, and you can, I mean, you save it as an XML, you can open it up later and reformat it however you want. So that at that point you could just reformat it to that CSV and do it that way. ORD is getting there, just hang in there. Anybody else? We're holding you all up for lunch, so. All right, thank you all.